Okay.
Let's
I
see,
wanna-
he is looking for study. Let's
Are we streaming?
buffer it. Yeah,
I don't think that's required for me to start though,
no,
right?
yeah, go for it.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. It is now 1:25 p.m. My name is Ryan Kanako. I'm the co-chair of the Hawaii Climate Change Mitigation and Adaptation Commission. Today is the July 15th, 2026 meeting of the commission. We are holding this meeting in person in the Kalanimoku Building Boardroom in Honolulu, and the meeting is also being streamed on YouTube. If there are any technical difficulties and YouTube goes down, the meeting will continue as this is an in-person meeting. We ask that members of the public, if there are any testifying, to limit your testimony to 3 minutes so that we can get to everyone. For all meeting participants, I would like to stress the importance of speaking slowly, clearly, and directly into the microphones that are before you on the desk. I'm going to now take a roll call vote of the commissioners. Co-chair for Department of Land and Natural Resources, present. Co-chair for Mary Alice Evans.
Office of Planning and Sustainable Development, present.
You're
Nicole
gonna
Rowan,
get it in.
Chair of the House Committee on Energy and Environmental
You're gonna
Protection,
get it in.
present.
Okay.
Yeah.
Designated?
Yeah.
Okay. Chairperson at Water and Lands.
I'm Kula Kukono. I'm here on behalf of Senator Chris Lee, who is the chair of the Senate Committee on Water, Land, and Culture and the Arts.
Thank you. Chair, oh, you already went.
Sorry.
No.
Here.
Rep Lowen here. Water and Land excused. HTA excused. Chairperson, Department of Agriculture and Biosecurity.
Hi, my name is Ray G, and I'm here on behalf of Chair Sharon Hurd.
Okay. Office of Hawaiian Affairs is excused. Hawaiian Homeland, Department of Hawaiian Homelands.
Aloha, Katie Lambert on behalf of the chair of the Department of Hawaiian Homelands.
Thank you. Department of Transportation.
Aloha, I'm here representing Ed Sniffen of the Department.
Thank you.
He's here.
Department of Health. Oh,
Hi.
who are you?
I know. I know. Diana Felton here on behalf of Director Fink.
Hi, Diana. Department of Education is excused. City and County for Honolulu is excused. Maui Planning Department.
Anna Lewis here on behalf of Director Takakura.
Thank you. Hawaii Planning Department, excused. Hawaii Planning Department is excused. Adjutant General.
Matthew Wall here on behalf of Major Chef.
And Manager for Facility Management.
Chris Lee, present.
Thank you. And Yvette.
Campus here on behalf of Director Tokioka.
Thank you. We have quorum. Also present is CCMAC staff, Leah, Samantha, and Megan. Are there anyone else in attendance that I've missed? Hearing none. Are there any announcements to make? Leah? None? Or anyone here? If not, we can proceed. Thank you. So agenda item 2, approval of the minutes. The minutes of October 8th, 2025. Has everyone read and received the written testimony? Not written testimony. Any minutes?
I move to adopt.
Okay, no discussion. Let's move to adopt. So moved. Is there a second?
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion on the minutes?
Question. Can you make a quick change and drop the S from DAB?
DAB?
It's Department of Agriculture and Biosecurity, no S.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
All one word.
Noted.
Thanks.
Okay. Motion's on the floor. All in favor, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Motion passes. That's your only agenda items.
Okay.
Thank you both.
Okay.
Yeah.
We can move with presentations, non-action items. Thank you, Chris.
Yep.
Thank you, Paul. We are now compliant. Okay, agenda item 3, presentation by new state solar specialist, Clarice Schaefer.
We can do the two. Maybe we can do that, Larry.
Aloha, everyone. Thank you for having me share today. My name is Clarice Schaefer, and I am the new Solar Energy Program Manager at the Hawaii State Energy Office. So today I'm going to provide an overview of the solar energy program and work that is underway to accelerate solar and battery storage deployment in Hawaii. Slide. So my position is funded by the U.S. Climate Alliance through a United Nations Foundation grant. And I'd like to thank Leah, Laramee, and HSEO for collaborating to attain this important funding. In my role, I focus on providing technical assistance to other state agencies, engaging in PUC proceedings, leading studies, and developing policies to incent solar PV and battery storage adoption. In addition to planning, I have a strong focus on implementation. Just a little bit of background about me. So I started at the State Energy Office, or HSEO, about 3 months ago. And before this, I worked at the Public Utilities Commission for over 10 years as an analyst across all regulated utilities, including electricity, gas, water, sewer, and some telecommunications. Some of my main focuses there were grid planning, emissions accounting, distributed energy resources or DER programs, and rate design. So the solar energy program's goals are to increase solar and battery deployment and ensure that projects and policies deliver real and measurable savings to customers and the state. Slide. The program currently has 4 principal work streams. The first is providing technical assistance to state agencies planning and procuring solar and battery projects. The second is evaluating Oahu's potential for substantially higher levels of distributed energy resources and identifying needed grid system upgrades and costs to get there. And I'll talk a little bit more about why the focus is Oahu, but it's primarily because it is land constrained and DERs are going to be a really important factor to getting us to our 100% RPS goals and our emissions reductions goals. The third is participating in PUC proceedings that directly affect solar deployment, resource planning, procurement, grid services, and electricity market design. And the fourth is developing and evaluating incentives and policy options that can accelerate rooftop and parking canopy solar adoption while reducing unnecessary pressure to develop open land. So together, these work streams address both individual project level and broader planning and policy frameworks. So one of the major areas of work is supporting state government agencies identify and evaluate solar and battery storage opportunities. Current and prospective partners include Department of Education, Department of Accounting and General Services, Hawaii Department of Transportation, and University of Hawaii. Slide. So the first step in this work is identifying facilities that are genuinely strong candidates for solar and storage. To do this, we look at a facility's electric use and their load profiles. We examine the physical site for roof condition, unshaded parking areas, solar exposure, and potential competing uses. We also look at ease of interconnection to the grid and permitting. And finally, it's important to also understand whether a location has important resilience needs or could provide resilience benefits to the state. After identifying a potential project, I can help evaluate its projected financial benefits. So many public sector solar projects use what's called power purchase agreements or PPAs. And under a PPA, a private developer owns and maintains the system while the government agency purchases the electricity produced under a long-term contract, which is typically 20 to 30 years. So I developed a PPA calculator that allows agencies to compare developer proposals on an apples to apples basis. And this tool can test different scenarios and sensitivities around PPA price, annual escalators, the expected production of the facility, different utility rate assumptions looking into the future, the facility's load, and other factors that determine savings year by year over the full term of the 20 to 30-year contract. And the current version of this calculator just focuses on solar, but I'm working with Optiny, which is a group contracted by the US Department of Energy to provide free services to the state. And we're working to also include battery storage and demand charge components in that model. In addition to financial modeling, I help agencies review the actual PPA contracts themselves to ensure that the terms protect the state. The contract should clearly address outages, lost production, performance guarantees, and remedies when the system does not perform as promised. So responsibility for operations, maintenance, equipment replacement, roof repairs and removal of reinstallation of panels must also be really clearly allocated in the contract terms. And the state should have reasonable buyout, termination, and end of term options as well. And these provisions can materially affect the life cycle value of a project. A low initial PPA price, or the price that you pay per kilowatt hour of energy produced by the project, it does not necessarily compensate for a contract that transfers excessive performance, operational, or termination risk to the state. A second major work stream is a proposed evaluation of Oahu's potential for higher levels of distributed energy resources, or DERs, and this includes rooftop solar and customer batteries. Because Oahu is so land constrained, like I mentioned, DERs are critical to ensuring we meet our renewable and emissions goals. This study will focus and examine grid upgrades, operational changes, and planning improvements that are needed to accommodate more customer-sited resources. And the report findings will help inform HECO's integrated grid planning process, the design of new DER programs, utility investments, new state policies, and future incentive design for DERs. HSEO is also participating in several PUC proceedings that will shape the future of solar in Hawaii. These include integrated grid planning, the competitive procurement of new generation resources, the design of a virtual power plant grid services program, and electricity wheeling. Integrated grid planning, or IGP, is the process through which HECO evaluates future electricity demand, existing resources, system constraints, and the investments needed to maintain reliability while advancing Hawaii's clean energy goals. And HSEO participates in both the stakeholder technical working group and community working group processes, and has filed comments on HECO's work plan, their inputs and assumptions, modeling methods, and procurement processes. Most recently, we filed comments in the IGP docket that emphasize 4 priorities. The first is that core planning data should be publicly available in usable formats, including island-specific information on renewable energy, DER, generation capacity, and electricity generation by specific resource year over year until at least 2045. The second is that major assumptions should be reproducible Stakeholders should be able to understand the original data calculations, Hawaii specific assumptions that, were derived potentially from assumptions that are usually used on the continent, and any material changes made during the planning process, which takes place over 5 years. The third is that emissions accounting should use consistent units and life cycle boundaries. So HECO should clearly explain and show whether emissions are incorporated as model inputs, model constraints, costs, or just merely calculated after the modeling is completed. I advocate that all of the above should be done. And fourth, distributed energy resources must be represented accurately. DER should not appear in the models only as a load reduction. HECO should account for DER's hourly production, exports, dispatch capability, contribution during peak periods, potential grid services, and importantly, the ability to defer or reduce other system investments such as new large power plants. The next proceeding we are actively involved in is, as a formal intervener, is Hawaiian Electric's competitive procurement for utility scale generation, or IGP RFP. So for context, IGP identifies grid needs, and the RFP procures projects and long-term contracts, mostly based on what was determined in the IGP. Both independent power producers and Hawaiian Electric can submit proposals to compete against each other in this procurement process. And the process is subject to some independent observer oversight and a certain level of PUC oversight. So this table just summarizes the renewable energy, grid forming, firm generation needs identified for Oahu and Hawaii Island that the RFP is calling for. These procurements are really consequential because selected projects can operate under contracts lasting several decades. Just think of the Waiau power plant, for example. It's been operating since World War II. The quality of the underlying assumptions, the evaluation criteria, and emissions information can therefore shape customer costs and the state's emissions trajectory far, far into the future. So over the past 2 years, as a formal intervener in this proceeding, HSEO is focused on procurement cadence and life cycle greenhouse gas accounting. A couple of weeks ago, on June 29th, we filed a motion asking the commission to reconsider its major decision approving the RFP, specifically the carbon emissions questionnaire that will be used to evaluate new combustion projects. And I just want to note that anyone here can submit public comments in response to that motion, and public comments for that matter in any of these dockets. So our concern is that projects may make carbon reduction claims using inconsistent assumptions, incomplete life cycle boundaries, or different analytical methods. And this can make a relatively high emitting proposal appear cleaner than it actually is. So HSEO recommended a standardized fuel agnostic questionnaire requiring developers to disclose the fuels that they expect to use. Developers would report both life cycle emissions associated with fuel input and, equally important, life cycle emissions per megawatt hour of electricity delivered. They would also disclose plant heat rates, source regions, transportation emissions, leakage assumptions, carbon capture performance if carbon capture is going to be part of that power plant proposal, and biomass or biofuel regrowth assumptions. So the bottom line is that all combustion proposals should be evaluated using consistent, auditable and comparable information, emissions information. Without standardization, there's a real risk that high emitting projects could be selected based on incomplete carbon claims, creating an emissions trajectory error that continues throughout the contract term, or even beyond then if the contract is renewed. The next slide just shows a copy of the proposed emissions questionnaire for your later viewing. The third proceeding we are working on is a relatively new one, and its focus is on designing a virtual power plant grid services program, or a VPP. So a VPP aggregates customer-sited technologies, and it remotely coordinates them to provide services to the electric grid. The resources and technologies that could be considered to be in a VPP program or to be a VPP includes solar paired with batteries, managed electric vehicle charging, water heaters, thermostats, and flexible commercial loads. And that is currently under discussion at the commission as we speak. So the central question is how to turn these customer-owned technologies into both reliable and appropriately valued grid resources. So potential high-value services include reducing the evening peak, supporting rapid changes in demand or renewable production, responding during emergencies, reducing renewable energy curtailment, and providing targeted relief at constrained portions of the grid. And HSEO brings a statewide policy and implementation perspective to the proceeding, and this includes affordability, resilience, clean transportation, public facility participation, equity, customer protections, and transparent valuation methods. The final work stream is evaluating policy concepts to accelerate rooftop and parking canopy solar. Potential concepts and potential bills include a state building clean energy requirement, extending and amending the Renewable Energy Technology Income Tax Credit, or RETITC, so that it aligns with the state's 2045 RPS goal. Just noting this year it was changed significantly. So yeah, potential changes may be necessary in the next session. Also a solar ready and new construction requirements. So the overall objective for new policy development is, really using already developed space before undeveloped land for solar. So in closing, 4 takeaways. We're here to, 1, help state agencies deploy better projects. 2, improve planning and valuation of distributed energy resources. 3, ensure that Hawaiian Electric and state agencies are doing proper emissions accounting at the right time. And 4, developing policies that accelerate cost-effective solar and storage adoption. So thank you so much for supporting this work and your time, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you. Questions from the commission?
Thank you so much. That was very helpful. Have you had an opportunity to make some rough order of magnitude estimates about how much already built facilities still have space for rooftop solar? And have you thought about the division between individual resident rooftop solar versus commercial or state government rooftops or parking canopies, non-canopies?
Yes.
Available, possible, uncanopied.
Yes, we have, and we're in the beginning phases of kind of piggybacking off of the results of a 2021 technical potential study conducted by the National Renewable Energy Lab. At the time, now it's NLR, National Lab of the Rockies, which identified DER technical potential across the state. We are also working with Reed as we speak to get all of the information of what buildings rooftop solar is installed on. And that will help us identify the remaining amount of space that's left for solar. And in addition to that, we're going to be looking at parking lots as well.
Looking at what?
Parking lots.
Oh, yes, right.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Question?
You mentioned that the evaluation and the studying of the DER potential is Oahu based. The tech support for state agencies, does that extend statewide to neighbor islands?
So I mentioned a couple things. So the Oahu, we still have to procure that study. We're waiting on state energy program funding to go through to get that study procured. And again, for that one, we're focusing on Oahu because it is so land constrained. Regarding the other contract that I mentioned for technical support, that one is with a group called Optany. And they got a US Department of Energy grant to provide technical assistance to all state agencies. So they're not only working with us, but they're working closely with, right now, I believe, with DAGs as well.
Just FYI, the state, Mooney Campus, Hawaii State Energy Office, the state energy program, that's also Department of Energy federal formula funds. So we have been going through a lot of back and forth with the federal government on a lot of those funds in the past year or so.
I do want to note for the record that Office of Hawaiian Affairs Representative Lynn Alale entered the room 1:34 p.m. Anyway, any other questions from Commission?
Just to contextualize this, so your position is specific to working on DERs, and how many positions are there dedicated otherwise in the energy office to working on?
So we
Solar.
all work, because our work is so interdisciplinary. My position is the only position that exclusively focuses not only on DERs, but also utility scale solar. I'm really focusing mostly though on DERs right now. Pretty much all of our other positions at the office do touch on DERs in some way. And the count of employees I don't have off the top of my head working on DERs, but everyone touches DERs in some way. Right now, we're actively coordinating across all sections to update the Haven visualization model to
A lot of work
incorporate
goes into that, apparently.
DER work. Excuse me.
A lot of work goes into Haven, apparently.
Yes.
I mean, like Oahu is land constrained. I think we all understand that, but there are also still is a significant amount of utility scale to be built out and land available for that. And
Yes.
HECO's working on the renewable energy zones, et cetera. So, I mean, given if you read the enabling statute for the Hawaii Energy Office, which is like very fundamentally focused on facilitating renewable energy deployment, it's concerning to think there's no one dedicated to working on utility scale solar in the energy office.
So I was answering your question about DERs, and we all touch on DERs.
Okay, yeah, I was asking if your position was solely, because it looks like all your policy recommendations are really specific to DERs.
Right now they are, just because that's where we find where there's the most gap in terms of policy. We can be doing a lot more to take advantage of spaces that are already developed.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we find that, there are strong policies already in place to incentivize utility scale solar development. We just really want to fill that gap. And then in terms of positions, people working on utility scale renewable related work, everyone touches on that at our office.
Okay, I guess it would be interesting to hear your opinion, and then if there's any work happening on this or recommendations. I know there's been some research showing that, aside from tax credits coming and going, et cetera, federal tax credits, et cetera, that the cost of renewables in Hawaii is comparably higher than other states. And that's not the cost of labor or goods, but the soft costs related to permitting et cetera. Is there any work that you guys are doing to try to see if there's ways that we can work through that and get to a place where we're at least comparable with other states? I mean, I feel like that would help the cost both of DERs and utility scale.
Yes, definitely. So.
And I would love to work with you on that if you have ideas. Yeah.
Wonderful. So there's currently, and always room for improvement, the credit task force, which is working on really expediting and coordinating permitting for utility scale solar projects. We meet regularly with developers, Wine Electric, and other state and county agencies to coordinate and expedite permitting. Yeah, there have been past efforts to work with DPP to expedite their permitting process for distributed solar as well.
Right. And if there's a way to achieve some policy changes so that it's not a matter of like having to come in and push on each individual project to try to speed things up every time.
Definitely, yes. I think that would be really helpful.
Okay, has it been looked at at all or not really?
So I'm in my third month
Okay,
in this job.
fair enough.
But yeah, I mean, like I mentioned, the credit task force, and then just regularly coordinating with other agencies that have control over permitting. And then I think it would be helpful to collaborate on developing new policies for the next legislative session. And then also looking at not only state legislative reforms, but also working at the county level as well.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks.
Energy Office, you had a comment?
I would just add, to definitely agree. I would just say we have been working, I think a lot of the slowdown, it has been actually with the PUC regulatory process in recent years, particularly sort of the competitive bid framework and the batch selection. So Clarice did mention it in her presentation, but really pushing for rolling procurements rather than, you know, if a project is selected as a part of a competitive bidding framework, it has very little flexibility to change the price that they're selected. And then if they drop out, they have to wait a very long time before re-bidding into the next competitive bidding process. So we have filed comments and we're really pushing on those comments for faster procurement of the utility scale resources. And, you know, based on even the credit task force, I would say that most recent slowdowns have been from Wine Electric, the developers really taking a lot of time to actually file their power purchase agreements. And there's obviously many reasons for that. Really hard because a lot of that is outside of our control. But we always have this philosophy, like control the things within your control, and make sure that if you open it up and you're not having unnecessary slowdowns because of a framework that exists. So that's really regulatory. And that change would need to happen, be driven by the Public Utilities Commission.
I did want to note just with regard to speeding up the process to get projects interconnected at the utility scale. There's a lot of work happening on the continent for continental big grid systems to use AI to do interconnection review studies. And that's another huge time suck here and a huge cost for both developers and the utility are these huge interconnection review studies. Maybe there could be potential to build off of work done on the continent to integrate AI into interconnection review study processes. And that could help also maybe overcome the need for doing large procurements and bid selection in batches. And so that could help speed up the process as well.
Officer Planning, any
Yeah.
question?
Do state agency facilities, including their parking lots, fall into the utility scale? Or are they more like residential in terms of permitting?
That's a good question. So they would mostly be what's considered commercial scale, which is notably smaller than
that-
utility
So
scale.
utility scale, commercial scale, and then residential rooftops would be the continuum.
So in terms of sizing, commercial scale systems are usually like over 100 kilowatts to maybe 2 to 3 megawatts at the largest. And utility scale systems on average have been coming in at about 30 to maybe 300 megawatts. So quite a bit. Utility scale projects are directly interconnect often to the transmission system, whereas commercial scale projects are much, much smaller than utility scale projects. And then also in terms of the contractual agreements, utility scale projects have a direct power purchase agreement with the utility, whereas commercial scale projects, especially those for government facilities, because governments often don't have the upfront capital to fund a project, they have to enter into what's also called a power purchase agreement. But those PPAs are completely different than utility scale PPAs, in that they contract directly with a solar developer, and then they'll sign up for a program such as the newly created Smart DER program. So the programs that they participate in are actually now, as of 2 years ago, now the same as what residential customers participate in. So they get the same compensation.
So perhaps a little easier for state agencies to contemplate, turning their rooftops or parking lots into electricity generation.
Definitely. And it can save the state taxpayers tremendous amounts of money still, even without the federal tax credits. Yeah, you can say the utility bills that I'm seeing now entering into this job of the state are just, oh my goodness, they're huge.
Yes. Dags will be very happy to hear you're working on this.
Yeah, I mean, technically the energy efficiency in state facilities is supposed to be moving forward and probably most agencies are not compliant. So it would make sense to do that work in conjunction with encouraging them to add energy systems.
And yeah, it always makes sense. And that's a really good point. It makes sense to look at energy efficiency before in solar. And we have someone working at our office on the energy efficiency building benchmarking, and I'm actually piggybacking off of that work to help identify candidate facilities for solar.
Yeah, we actually passed a bill many years ago now that I think the deadline was beginning of 2026 for all state agencies to have addressed, like probably at a minimum, it would have been lighting and HVAC, and I don't think that has happened, but
And it's hard.
We need people in each agency that are
within
working on
the
it. Yeah.
agencies, cause we're not a CIP agency, so we can't go after any CIP funds, for that. Because, DAGs, DOT, UH, those are CIP agencies, and there's just not dedicated. They're balancing.
I mean, they can do performance contracting, but yeah.
And they do, like DOT has a pretty substantial performance contract for EVs and energy efficiency. So yeah, but still always room for improvement, especially with building design, conservation, efficiency, just so much opportunity there.
So DHHL actually happens to be just in the beginning stages of, they actually have been trying to get parking canopy solar for a while, but they didn't have the means. We finally are starting that. And so I just wanted to get clarification based on the conversation that was happening, because two things. One, we're probably going to RFP it, but we have been approached as well because we are in a prime location for something like that. And we've been looking for something like that. But you mentioned the PPA calculator, there's different types of PPA depending on scale, so we would not be a utility scale, we would be the commercial scale. So, if we needed help, the technical, like, that's all the stuff that we love to hear, that there's resources and help, and now that we know that you are there, we will be coming to you for sure.
Yeah, and that
But
PPA
that's,
sorry.
yeah, so, the calculator, the TA, you're all there regardless of the scale. Okay.
Yep, so that PPA calculator I actually modeled it off of one that was made in Minnesota for Excel for state government use. And that's for commercial scale, so that
Oh,
would
great.
be,
Okay.
yeah, completely relevant to your project, and I'd be happy to get in contact with you and help with that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions for presenter?
Yeah.
One question here.
Here, thanks. You mentioned that you folks are interveners on Hawaiian Electric's RFP. Are they still able to make contract awards with your folks' input?
So the most recent IGP RFP, the commission issued a decision on the RFP a couple months ago, I believe. And so Hawaiian Electric has to make just certain revisions to that RFP, and then it will be issued for bidding. Does that answer your question?
Yep.
Going around the room. Any other questions? Thank you, Clarice. I have to open up to testimony. Any testimony on the matter? Hearing none, I'll close the matter, and yes, next item is Mr. Wall.
Thank you, Clay.
Thank you.
Good to meet you. I said it's good to meet you.
Oh, thank you. I thought you said this seems like a fun adventure.
That always is.
It
It
is,
always is.
yes.
So moving on to item 4, discussion on building resiliency, advancement and needs by Matthew Wells.
So as a preamble, because it's not up yet, I'll point out that a lot of this presentation is based on the green fee.
Mhm.
Multiple reasons for us to be using the green fee as best as we can. A whole lot of the mitigation and the resilience funding that has been implemented in the state of Hawaii has been as a result of disasters. HMGP or other FEMA type grants like BRIC grants and things like that, flood mitigation assistance. But we have no idea what FEMA is going to turn into.
Mhm.
And we don't know how long the grant funding conditions and positions are going to continue to last. So it was rightfully decided that we needed to be much more self-sufficient, and start developing our own programs and start working forward to taking care of ourselves. Obviously, we know more about what we need than the federal government knows about what we need. Because we're here and we're able to ground truth all of this. We're able to meet with people and discuss things. So having said that, that was the reason that part of the preamble for this. My name is Matthew Wall. I'm the Resilience Branch Chief for the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency. What that means is that I do the public assistance, the hazard mitigation, and the individual assistance. Bless you. And the hazard mitigation and the individual assistance programs within the state. And of course, write a whole lot of papers and do a whole lot of meetings and things like that too. Next slide, please, Matt. Wanted to throw this out here just to have a background with some different slides. I'm not going to read everything, but I know that the slides can be shared. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to institutionalize some of the knowledge behind the green fee so that when other people come in or new folks or rivals or whatever, they have the opportunity to learn a little bit about what the green fee is, how the process works, how it was generated, and just simply have some background knowledge to it. I know that everybody here knows everything about it and probably more than I do. It's just that simple, but let's institutionalize a little bit of knowledge. There are 3 eligible project categories: environmental stewardship, climate resilience and hazard mitigation, and sustainable tourism. The reason the sustainable tourism is in there is because that's where the money comes from. You know, it's like an additional tax on the tourists who come in, so we want to encourage them to come in and continue to come in. Green fees must be appropriated to state departments. 42 million is expected for FY 26, 87 expected for FY 27. They must be distributed equally. Now, equally doesn't mean to the penny, but it means approximate between all three project categories, and they must be spent or encumbered in the FY they are appropriated. Now, this is critical here because spent or encumbered indicates that you're making progress on your project that you put forward. It doesn't say that it has to be finished in the FY that you're funded it under, but it says that you've got to be able to show progress. Otherwise, what's the point of us setting aside that kind of money for something that's just going to sit there? Next slide, please. Green Fee Advisory Council reviewed and recommended the funding priorities. We ended up receiving over 600 project ideas, 105 department proposals, 500 public project ideas, and other submissions with more than $2 billion in projects submitted. That 47 million doesn't go a long ways into 2 billion. So there had to be some kind of prioritization that went into effect, and the Green Fee Advisory Council reviewed them, and they said, we like these projects and we like them split up into these categories so we can have that approximately equitable funding. Slide, please, ma'am. They recommended projects based upon 5 R's. I'm not going to read everything to you, but it's basically, you got to have something that has results. Otherwise, what are you doing this project for? It improves your readiness so that you can show that you're completing the project on time. We're going right back again to the encumbrance or the spending of funds. The relevance, you got to be able to prove that it is relevant to the category under which it was submitted. It doesn't do me any good to try to look at a project that says that I want to buy 500 boxes of crayons and this is going to improve tourism. Well, if you're going to do it, and it might, explain why and how it does it.
Mhm.
Leverages additional resources and fosters collaboration among government. Now, this is important. And I'm going to stop for a second here because we have wonderful, extraordinary silos of excellence. Okay. But what we need to do is be able to leverage the State Energy Office, Land and Natural Resources, County of Maui, and everybody together so that we understand that if I'm doing this and you're doing this, we're getting a synergistic effect of the projects that are going forward. So I know you were talking about the different valuations of and the identifications of where different solar power can be. My first thought when you were talking about that and just kind of a leverage type thing, and I'll be getting back with John Chin and other folks and Mark Glick about this, is the idea of saying, okay, if we're going to do this, well, how about we also go back, we've already got different areas of vulnerability identified. So let's prioritize some of the rooftop projects that we're doing that are identified from you into the areas of vulnerability so that we can make sure that we're increasing the resilience within that community and reducing the overall hazard and decreasing the amount of time it's necessary to be able to restore power. So, this is the idea of leveraging partnerships. NGOs are important. Vibrant Hawaii is a good example of that. American Red Cross. What are we doing to be able to show that we're improving and strengthening the relationships in the areas of resilience? And of course, the region we have to look at areas of heightened vulnerability, over tourism, or chronic underinvestment. We all know that there are different areas that are chronically underinvested in. We know that there are areas on all of our islands that are remote and isolated. What can we do to improve their capacity to be able to prepare for, respond to, recover from, and mitigate against the different disasters that are out there, thereby reducing the amount of energy, effort, and power that we have to implement to be able to, and I'm saying power in terms of financial power, people power, power, to be able to reduce the amount of response requirements that are necessary for that, which will then allow us to be able to continue investing and spreading out the other investments as we're going along. Next slide, please, ma'am.
Sorry.
So the green fee funding recommendations total 126.41 million, basically 2 FYs, the ones that were shown up. Environmental stewardship, 42.54 million. Climate resilience and hazard mitigation, 41.72, and sustainable tourism. As I specified, they're not precisely to the penny, but this is a concept of where we're able to get an approximate equality of effort into the different sessions that were there. Next slide, please. Green fee environmental stewardship, you can see it's broken down right there. That's how much was approximately invested in, or that's the approximate recommendations. Next slide, please. Climate resilience and hazard mitigation. Obviously, Lahaina is still very much on everybody's mind. It is on mine. I know it's on yours. I know it's on Seth McKee's also. Multi-hazard mitigation. What does that mean? That means multiple types of mitigation against multiple different hazards. So you can do, you can look at a hurricane, and a hurricane has got both water as well as wind. So it's got the flooding as well as that. So you look at saying, okay, if I'm taking one mitigation effort, can I address both potential hazards that are associated with it? Climate research, obviously critical, because you really truly need to know the measure, the level of what it is that you want to be able to mitigate against. I can sit here and I can say, well, I can throw up a sheet of plywood and my windows are good, but that's probably not accurate. Because I don't necessarily understand the nature or the wind force of the hurricanes or anything that's coming along with that, much less the construction or the building code that my home was built under to be able to address other elements such as that. Next slide. Household and community preparedness, coastal and flood mitigation, cesspools. That's critically important, obviously, because that's a health and safety factor as we're going on, and it's an environmental restoration as well as preservation element. The more we can get onto some kind of public sewer and or remediate some of the cesspools that are out there when the homes have already been on public sewer, then we can start looking at reducing the health hazards that are associated with them and taking better care of people. It's interesting that the coastal and flood almost. Thank you, man. It's interesting that the coastal and flood mitigation element is coming up here, because I know we've all been watching the Kauai and the riverbank and the cutting away and the threatening of homes and everything like that, as right there as the mouth of the river comes into the ocean. So that's technically both riverine and coastal potential flood. Okay, thank you. Like everything, all grants are subject to those that have the, to the golden rule. And that is those that got the gold makes the rules. And that's no disrespect to what's going on here, because it's absolutely good for what it is. Because if we have a person that's involved, such as the governor in this process, then that means that they have the interest. They also have the political willpower to be able to move forward with this. And the political willpower provides the top cover on the different things that need to be done. And it also provides the one-on-one conversations with the different counties that are going forward. So Governor Green had his own priorities that were a little bit different, or proposed slightly different from the green fee committee's recommendations, and added projects that were of high priority to the state leadership and needed funding, but also aligned with all three buckets. You can see the marine debris removal, protection of species of conservation importance, rainwater management in Mulholland Bay, community resilience hubs, which now I'm going right back to that power grid element, as well as the microgrid considerations. Wildfire home hardening, and that's a cost share program to be able to help the homeowners out. When the Lahaina wildfire happened, there were some tremendous pictures that were taken, of course, of all of the burned homes, and God bless those people and take care of them. There was one home that stood all by itself that did not catch on fire. And that's because it had been many different things that happened. They'd already removed all the shrubbery that had been around it, that the home had been built, and it had been built to a higher standard, utilizing some fire hardening techniques and mitigative factors that the other homes didn't have. And so by recognizing that that sort of thing creates and preserves homes for people, it also reduces the amount of people that can be unhomed and It preserves the lifestyle, the cultural elements. And quite honestly, it reduces the number of people that are going to need major levels of assistance should another disaster occur, which allows us then to continue to move forward with more mitigation. While building a safer Hawaii by advancing code resilience. Current building code in Hawaii is 2018. That's what we're still building to. We've had more than, we've had a couple of different code council updates since that time. But it's very reluctant to be able to be adopted. One, because of the cost of building here in Hawaii. Two, because in some cases it requires additional materials. Three, because has the potential to increase the cost for the homeowners to be able to buy. So you've got the transportation elements, the construction elements, the training of different people to be able to inspect the new homes, the lack of inspectors that are out there, the lack of people to be able to issue the building permits. So we have a large confluence of where we need to be able to look at things. And it's not just the advancing the code resilience is not just the building code itself, but the implementation and actualization of the code in its own right. Sustainable tourism, low loop parking, and lookout improvements. Absolutely. A lot of people come because of the scenery, the views. Let's create opportunities for them to be able to come in and take great pictures and when it's all done. But those were some of the government's recommendations. Next slide, please, ma'am. Green fee timeline, February 2026. Recommendations were released. July 1, 2026 is start FY 2027. This is where we have. And this is the green fee funding is now available to the departments that have received the projects that they have. So as a consequence, if you are not looking at how you're going to implement your project or not looking at how you're going to encumber your projects or what you need to pay for, now's the time to make sure that you've got your scope of work laid out so that you can say, I want this much money on this date and I want this much money on that date, so that we can encumber the amount of funds within the FY 2026. Excuse me, FY 2027. Spring and summer of 2026, year 2 funding recommendations are going to be being developed, which will of course be the Green Fee Advisory Council, the governor's office, and anybody else that they so decide would be important to be able to provide recommendations. Okay. So what are high EMA? We got some money. We didn't get as much as some departments, but the part of that is because we still have a fair amount of access to some hazard mitigation grant programs, which is funding that's available specifically after disasters. The way that works is that if the disaster is, if we receive $100 million in federal funding, then HMGB provides $15 million in federal funding beyond the $100 million that we receive for public assistance. Problem is that the federal government is cutting out HMGB. 4909, the last disaster we had, the Konalos, typically we put in the request for the different public assistance categories and we put in the request for the hazard mitigation grant program. And sir, as you no doubt know, category G, which features a whole lot of public lands, was denied.
Mm-hmm.
We are appealing that. We have not heard word on the appeal yet. Hazard mitigation was not even awarded. So we're looking at this and we're kind of going, okay. And this has been across multiple states on the mainland also, where they're starting to cancel out the hazard mitigation. They were also looking at canceling out the building resilience and infrastructure grants, the BRIC grants, and building resilient infrastructure and community grants. And so that's part of the things that we, like I said in the very beginning of this preamble, we need to focus on. What are we doing for ourselves? The projects we have, Hawaii stream gauge installation, $250,000. Now, obviously that's not just for hazard mitigation. Well, actually it is for hazard mitigation, but it's also for understanding the changes that are going on in the riverine world also. As climate change occurs, that typically means that we're going to have more violent weather as we're going forward. So something that might have been a 1% probability of occurrence of event 20 years ago might now be a 5% probability of occurrence event. So if we start understanding based upon actual measures that we're receiving, I think it was stated earlier that you got to have the numbers, right? Have the information that we actually are looking at, then we now have the ability to start looking at saying, what are some of the planning things that we need to start considering? What are some of the mitigation actions we need to start looking at in order to protect community, environment, culture as we're going forward? We're looking at the residential retrofit program. 3 phases to that program: design, assessment, and implementation. For the most part, this is going to be working with the communities to be able to provide them some hurricane clips inside of their roofs. About 50%, a little bit over 50% of all of the homes, private homes built in Hawaii, predate 1970. Since they predate 1970, they were obviously not up to not even the 2018 codes. And in a lot of cases, were not built to code compliance for any that they might have had back then, which were like next to none. So you're looking at the single wall construction with the roof that's tacked on, and quite often the venting up at the top to be able to allow the trade winds to come in and come out to be able to cool. That makes a great opportunity for a hurricane wind to come in, and oh, by the way, we're going to lift the roof off. So the residential retrofit is looking at things like hurricane clips that can go in to connect the rafters to the roof framework. That also provides a measure of earthquake protection because it creates a better envelope with a ground to rooftop connection to be able to stabilize the shaking instead of the wall shaking like this and then the roof going like this and then coming on. Looking at the Lahoihoi Charter School wind retrofit, same thing, roof, but not necessarily the roof clips in that is the total, but also looking at things like the roof construction as it is. Disaster preparedness for limited English proficiency and Americans with disabilities. It's clear that we've got 23, 26 different primary languages that are spoken on Hawaii. It doesn't make sense for us to only be speaking to people in English and trying to give them advice on what they can do. It just is not feasible and doesn't work. Next slide, please, ma'am. Partners that we have with the Kauai Emergency Management Agency, State Department of Transportation Highways, Land and Natural Resources, Parks, Hawaiian Homelands, thank you, ma'am. USGS. The USGS is primarily tied into the river gauges. Rising levels, support situational awareness, improve public access, because honestly, if you see this, we have a lot of obviously short-stemmed, high-impact events when it comes to raining. But if I know that at the top of the mountain that it's all of a sudden now raining and the water is starting to pick up, and I got 20 minutes to get to grab my wife and her 2 cats and get out, then I got 20 minutes, whereas I might not have had that before. 3 stream gauges at 3 locations. Anahola, Pa'a, and Wailua, and again to integrate with the USGS. I think again, as stated earlier, that that's an underused system because it is also a historical system of record where we could look at the levels of the stream gauges in the past and start identifying the changes that are created either through construction, where we create less pervious surfaces, and from the differences in the climate change that come forward, and utilizing that information, you can now start doing a little bit better predictive analysis of what's going to happen with the end and downstream impacts, which then creates opportunities to look at what cultural location is nearby that we're going to need to be able to protect. Who are the people that are there? What is the fragility of the system of the power grid that's right there, or any water? Or are we looking at an impact on a wastewater treatment plant, or is this going to overrun cesspools? So just some of the thought process we have. Next slide, please. Lahoihoi, larger window. One things we're leveraging here is the FEMA Hazard Mitigation Grant Program for previous storms, to be able to fortify the median band road to existing enhanced hurricane protection areas to level 3. As I said, it was a little bit more than hurricane clips. But the other thing is that we're using the $268,000 as the non-federal match for the HMGP. So by doing this, we're basically getting the federal money for free. I like to tell people, well, FEMA says that for every $1 spent on mitigation, you get $7 return on investment. Okay. But for every dollar we spend or every dollar we get, so out of $7, we have to put $1 up as a match, or, you know, roughly 25%. So I look at it as saying, okay, so I'm going to put a quarter in and I'm going to get $6 or $7 back off that 1 quarter. I'm going to you know, it's, the numbers aren't exact. I can work it out for you later. But the idea is to be able to say, if I put that quarter in, I'm going to be able to get 75 cents back. And at that $1 that's being spent, I'm getting $7 return on investment. So I'm using my 1 quarter to gain $7. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, I'm making sure that I wasn't getting too cuckoo in my explanations for people. So I like spending a 1 quarter and getting a you know, 28 times return. Right? Yeah. So as you can see, our partners are great. DAGS, DOE, Apahoehoe Community Public Charter School. And next slide, please. Residential retrofit. This tells you exactly what I was talking about before. Your hurricane straps or clips are on the picture on the bottom right. National protective standards. The key is to identify the homes that would benefit the best from this and the homes that are the most. If I can find 7 homes in a row to be able to do this for, it makes it a whole lot more sense in time, you know, in terms of time and cost effectiveness than it is to do 2 homes here, 1 home here, and 3 homes here, because I can get them all done. But that, of course, requires participation with the homeowners, the right of entry, and all of the other stuff to done. Next slide, please. This is clear what we're talking about. Limited English proficiency, which I think is me sometimes. Americans with Disabilities Act. Clearly, not everybody has the capacity to be able to hear, read, or may have other issues that are associated with it, in addition to just the ability to speak English. So we need to recognize we're going to be able to work with the communities, develop, maintain relationships before the disasters, but also during and after the disasters. One of the biggest issues that we had with Lahaina was the communication element because of languages. And in a couple of cases, we were actually supported by, in one case, the Filipinos, the nonprofit and the families that were there were able to reach out to and communicate with and support the other folks there. I will point out that regardless of anything else, Governor Green has stated very clearly that we don't leave anybody behind. Doesn't matter whether you're an unhomed individual. Doesn't matter if you're if you work with you're an American citizen, if you're not an American citizen, if you're green card, if you're undocumented. Everybody's going to get some kind of help. There are going to be some that are going to receive more than others because of need or because of us being able to validate that they were involved in the disaster or impacted by the disaster, which is one of the big issues with the unhomed or unhoused people, is the inability to be able to validate that they were actually living somewhere that was impacted by the disaster. And so are they genuinely deserving of the assistance? In many cases, yes, but it's also very difficult. But the reality is that we try very hard to make sure that we're in communication and contact with everybody, with whatever programs are going out there, whether it's a federal program, whether it's a state program, or whether it's the states supporting the county programs. Next slide, please. That's pretty much all I have in terms of the presentation. I know I went about a couple minutes over my 15 minutes, and I'm sorry, Leah. But you were the one that asked me to do this presentation, so you only have yourself to blame. Are there any questions for me?
Questions?
I have one.
Go ahead.
Matthew, I noted that you did talk about the Building Code Council. And that, of course, is a challenge because it hasn't been able to meet and it doesn't have staff. So the House of Representatives initiated a process called the Speed Task Force to and the building codes are one of the 6 permitted interaction groups that are 3 of which are meeting now to come up with recommendations for the building codes to reduce delay, but also to look at what might be currently needed to support resilience. So the Office of Planning might be reaching out to you on that.
I believe that Haima actually has an individual on the Building Code Council now, the very first time. That they're there as a council member rather than as a interested observer. We do have a new administrator, as you're no doubt aware.
Yeah.
If David Lopez, our new administrator, wants me to be involved, I am more than happy to be involved with it. So we will find out what's going on. But I will say that building codes is a problem everywhere. It's not just here in Hawaii. I will also point out that in some cases, in some federal grants, the fact that we do not have up-to-date building codes makes us less competitive in terms of being able to receive resiliency grants. Specifically, I'm thinking of BRIC grant, Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities grant, where they actually provide points for how well you are up to date with your codes. Those points kill us, and especially since we don't have 5,000 grant writers working on these grants for us too. It's a case of we will get the state set aside, but other than that, that's about it. Because we're just not competitive because of the building codes. It is not a simple fix. It'll be a fix that is going to be pain and suffering as we go along. There are going to be a whole lot of voices in this direction and voices in this direction, and all of them need to be heard, and all of them have valid points. But we need to do something.
Can I just add that the state does have a building code specialist, Kanika Viola Lindsay, who we've been working with, and Haima is now working with as well, to receive some BRIC funding, which is formula funding. So guaranteed for building code plus ups. So we've been working and coordinating on that to make sure that we can in the future be more competitive.
Is that a deal in our position?
No, it's a DAG's position.
DAG's position. Okay, thanks. Yeah.
And
Thank you, Chair.
yeah, I can also add just a bit. So the SBCC chair for a long time was in our office.
Yeah.
He did just retire. So we've kind of stressed like our focus as the energy office should really be on energy codes rather than the entirety of building codes. So we have a new person on the State Building Code Council for codes is Ron Chatterjee.
Okay.
He'll be taking over a lot of Howard's work on that and will become sort of the designee for our office. But I will echo with like we have BRIC grants as well. And energy codes not being up to date is also an issue when we go for grants. The good news is the counties do have the ability to sort of adopt codes, but the SBCC does a lot of work up front for the counties and amending IECC, etc. That counties a lot of time they just don't have the technical capacity, at least on the energy side to do that. So we've done some we've been trying to work on technical assistance with that. But it has been hard without having the SBCC active because of the emergency proclamation.
Please understand, I'm not criticizing whenever I say that our building codes are out of, I'm not criticizing anybody, any organization. I'm not even criticizing the state or county when I'm saying that our building codes are behind. I'm making a statement of fact. And that statement of fact affects a whole lot of things that all of us are working on, whether it's County Maui Department of Planning, Energy and Environmental Protection, power, State Energy Office. It affects Hawaiian Homes Commission. It affects a whole lot of us. So this is something that is, if we're genuinely committed to becoming a more resilient state with more resilient communities, we need to spend a little bit more time and effort, in my opinion, on the building codes. And we can utilize things like the brick plus up funding that's there. Utilize that to be able to open the door to additional brick funding, because we then become more competitive. And also too, then if we're doing a project that has to do with mitigation or resilience, then we're looking at being able to say, good, we can now build to this standard, or we can make an adjustment to the project that we're doing because the building is now at this standard, or the new buildings are going to be at this standard. I apologize for getting on a soapbox.
Does it, for the resilience measures, is there a way to calculate? I mean, I know the pushback is always like developers don't want to add to the upfront cost of housing, but often the measures that improve the building codes will save money over the long term for
So
the
there
owner,
are,
maybe not always though, but does that ever get quantified? Like the measures that I assume Haima is more interested in resilience measures. I'm always thinking about like the energy efficiency.
so
stuff,
actually,
right?
yes, you can start looking at some of the energy efficient measures. It's, if you look at the LEED construction concepts, LEED construction, which you're now looking at the different building codes that are going up, and they're doing additional energy efficiency. There is some return on investment there. There's also a potentially return to the investment to the homeowner.
Does it like reduce insurance costs or?
It can,
things
that's
like
what I was
that? Yeah.
You can, depending upon, if you can demonstrate that if you can demonstrate, I'll give you an example. If you live in a flood zone and your home is ground level, then you are much more likely to be impacted. The interior and the frame of your home is going to be much more likely to be impacted by flooding. If you live in that same flood zone and your home has been elevated, then your insurance costs are actually going to drop, because especially since you have to have flood insurance because you're in the flood zone, then the insurance costs are going to drop because your home is at less risk. The same can be true, and the same argument can be made if you're looking at wind retrofits, to be able to say, my home is now much more wind resistant. My home is much more now fire resistant. To be able to show that we're proving to the insurance company that yes, this happens and this can occur. Is this a nationwide, including Hawaii and the mainland, standardized effort behind all of the different insurance companies also? No, because they don't want to give up their money. Or they don't want to, they don't want to have to go through the time of being able to, and giving up their money is not just the money that they're receiving, but it's also the effort that involves. If I come up and I say, well, my home has been mitigated against this, then the insurance company is going to have to validate that. So they're going to have to take the time and the energy to either review the building plans, the receipts, or go in and send an inspector in, or whatever it is, to be able to then now validate that the home has been mitigated. So is this a consistent thing that goes across the board? No. Are there studies that show quantified factors that reduce the risk to the individual and reduce things like energy costs and stuff like that? Yes. Does that answer your question, ma'am?
Sorry, I can also provide a little bit. So IECC, International Energy Code Council, does require life cycle cost analysis for things like HVAC systems, higher performing insulation, air sealing, etc. One of the big roles of the SBCC is actually adapting that to our climate, because a lot of times the IECC life cycle cost analysis compliance spreadsheets are not consistent with Hawaii's climate. So things like airflow, like jalousie windows, don't necessarily perform well. So the role of the SBCC is modifying the IECC acronyms for our climate. And when there are sort of the lag time between code updates, SBCC, like it does require manpower to do that. And then there's the county code adoption of SBCC's amendments. So I do want to say, yes, there is like an LCCA required under IECC compliance standards. It's how do we modify it for Hawaii's climate?
I'll point out that even when it's all modified and figured out, it's not just a question of putting the words on the paper.
Yeah.
Now you've got to go out and educate the contractors, you got to educate the architects, you got to educate the building inspectors as well as the counties in addition to the adoption, so that they understand what it is to look for. So it is an extensive, expensive process. Will it make things safer for the homeowner? Yes. But the question is now, how much effort is going to be put into it?
Other questions?
More. For the funding that was given to Haima for the home retrofits, how far along, I guess, is that in getting set up? And do you envision it like, I mean, I know it feels like the ledge just ended, so probably not far, but do you envision it like something that will be broadly available where like homeowners can apply for rebates, or how do you envision that rolling out?
There are a couple of thoughts and process. First off, I'm going to say that this is being built off of a program that has previously existed for us.
Okay.
Okay, so we do have some measures of processes that we're using. The idea is to be able to work with the homeowner, potentially pre-identify some contractors that then be able to work with the homeowner and the contractors to get the home retrofitted. So that way we've got a licensed contractor that's potentially doing the work, even though putting hurricane straps or clips in doesn't necessarily require a licensed contractor. We still want to know that it made sure that it's done right. And there's also the question of the liability that's associated with it too. If we're going to be funding something and we give the homeowner money, we need to be able to validate that the homeowner used the money. We need to be able to validate that the action of the money that they were given was used appropriately. And should something occur, we don't want to be on the tag end of something because somebody had done something wrong. So there's the legal association with it that's going in. And I need to point out again that we have to go through the process of getting the rights of entry and all of this taken care of too. The bonus side is that if it's done by the contractor and the documentation is in place, then the homeowner can take the documentation to their insurance company and they can say, can I get a discount? You know, not regular homeowners insurance, because wind damage is covered under regular homeowners insurance.
I have a question.
So
So in the situations like a Lapahoehoe charter retrofit where the beneficiary agency is not necessarily Haima, it's DOE or DAGS. How do you envision expending those funds? Or is Haima the expending agency, or does that money go to DOE or DAGS?
Haima is the expending agency. Same as Haima's. So when it comes to the federal grants, like this is being used by HMGP, Haima is essentially a pass-through. And the pass-through can go to legally allowed state or local governments and appropriate nonprofits. So the charter in this case is functionally a nonprofit. So that serves a public good and not a political good. So we couldn't necessarily give something like to the ultra old such and such party people to be able to make leaflets. Okay. And I'm pointing at myself as being ultra old. Okay. making fun of myself, but the idea is that you can't do that because that's not serving necessarily a definable public good, public service, but the charter school is. So the funding mechanism will go through HIEMA. The charter school will be and DAGs will be doing a lot of the work. We're gonna get the ending, the bills, and then we will in the case of the HMGP, we're gonna be reimbursing. In the case of the green fee, we'll probably go through a very similar process to support it that way.
Thank you.
I will point out that just as a side note, if there's a great big HMGP grant with millions of dollars, or, you don't have to wait until the work is done to start asking for reimbursements. And the same would be true with the green fee. If you've got somebody that's got planning or scoping that you had to pay for or was paid for, submit that bill, let us get the money back right away. That shows project and movement on the project.
On the room? Seeing none, thank you.
Can I make one recommendation real quick
Yes.
for next year's green fee? Start thinking about it now. Think about the projects that you're going to want, the projects that you might want to have, start prioritizing them. Start looking at the potential amount of money that you might have. If you have and I'm going to use the phrase shovel-ready project, great. Figure it out, try to get it in place now, start planning it now so that when you're ready to submit, you can sit here and say, here it is. And that comes in it, and that's usually, in my opinion, that's evaluated at a much higher level, instead of coming up and saying, I'd like to do this, and I think it's going to cost 25 million.
We had talked about offline, I guess, the need to talk about the process for the green fee fund allocation. And I wonder if it's something we should add as an agenda item to a future commission meeting, or if it's appropriate to bring it up now.
I think I don't know if we can bring them now, maybe, since you brought it up in his comments, but as far as I know, I'm still waiting on the development of the new process, if there will be. I'm sure that it's gonna be different than last year.
Well, you mean what comes from the GFAC?
Well, what comes from executive side, yeah.
Yeah, okay. But if we wanna. Okay, so we're not sure you're at liberty to talk about it.
I'm still in the dark as well.
Oh, okay. Well, if we want to change the process. Not just, if we want to have a bill to actually allocate certain streams of funding outside of this, like what the governor and the legislature get to put in a list, then there should be a bill for it, in which case we need to be discussing it in advance of the time that December, January timeframe.
I'd like to throw one more thing out.
Sure.
I have heard the governor mention on more than one occasion. That's a good idea. He talks about the interconnectivity of planning. And in this case, if we're looking at the interconnectivity of planning, we can also look at the interconnectivity of projects. So it might be a good idea to start, instead of having a silo of excellence, to reach out to the other partners and saying, I know that you've got an interest in this area and I have an interest in this area. What can we do together? And then if you submit individually, then you have like I said, a synergistic element that goes together with if the two projects come in together. And if they don't come in together immediately, then you know that you've done some of the groundwork to be able to validate your project later on.
Yeah, I think what we've been talking about is whether for that amount of funding collected through the TAT, some portion of it should be not recommended by the governor, but actually set aside directly to, create a series of special funds and set aside directly to state agencies, particularly like for the community stewardship piece, because I think that we shouldn't be asking for applications or proposals, in my opinion, directly, because it creates an unrealistic expectation. Like there should be a process where we understand we want funding to go to community stewardship of marine resources or watershed management, and then give that to the appropriate division with the appropriate staffing to fund it. to manage it and then have them put out RFP for community stewardship projects. And then we'll also have assurance that a certain amount of funding is getting spent on those intended purposes. And I think similarly, you could, we talked about whether one of my things I'd like to see would be dedicated funding for the cesspool loans and, we could look at the sustainable tourism piece. I'm not as familiar with that necessarily, but we had a bill we had introduced, but I think that kind of came in last minute and it needs broader discussion among all the stakeholders, that we could set that up, have funding allocated to specific things so that it kind of took the politics out of it and still be left with a significant amount of funding that the governor could put in proposals and the GFAC could look at for things that are more on a one-time basis, I guess, or specific projects or that kind of thing. And then that would go to the legislature for them to do their sort of quasi budget process. Because what we did see this year was a lot of, I think there's a fear of mine, maybe not other legislators, like we don't want it to turn into just a CIP process where it's like, what do you want? What do you want for your district? We want it to stay true to the intention of the original legislation to address the needs that were outlined in that. But this is the good group to talk about it. We're all here.
There's limited I can talk about it, okay? Designee. I'm neither an elected official nor am I, Major General Logan. However, I'm happy to, if you want inputs, I can speak from my perspective, but only my perspective on that sort of thing.
Sure. Anyone that has thoughts?
Well, to the community stewardship portion, we are going out for an RFP. So as envisioned, at least we're trying to make it work regardless of the process that played out this past session. Those should be queued up fairly soon. I think I finalized at least the draft RFP.
Nice.
Yeah.
I
So,
think I got an email about it while we're in this meeting.
yeah.
Yep.
Okay, good. It's going out then. And then strangely, talking about the special fund, I mean, the way it shook out, it's in the LNR special, all the funds are in the LNR special fund, and we're effectively a pass-through to all the other agencies. So, I mean, that's the current solution. I think there should be a long-term solution.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it would help to know that there was a certain stream of funding coming every year and that you had staff in place to manage it and that it wasn't kind of a uncertainty every single cycle.
And I would appreciate more capacity on that since now we're effectively managing funds for everyone. That's my plug for positions. Yeah.
I like the idea of that, some of the, for planning purposes, having sort of known consistent funding. But as you mentioned, there's also is some utility for a little bit or some portion being in not dedicated, especially to be able to address like very emerging
Yeah.
issues that may come up
Funds
that we
outside of
just can't
session.
plan for.
Yeah.
I mean, it's 100 million,
Yeah,
right?
it
So
should
I
be
think the bill that we had thrown in, which again, it was not necessarily the template for what we have to do because that was sort of last minute and didn't have a lot of discussion, but I think it was around half and half, if not less. So that's still 50 million, for those emerging things and specific projects.
I just want to note for the record, Department of Transportation Representative Laura Kalakua entered the chat at 2:58.
Apologies for being late.
No worries. Any further discussion on this matter? Okay. Moving on. Wait, public testimony. Any public testimony? Closing public testimony. And moving on to agenda item number 5. Mary Alice.
Yeah, so this is the last item on our agenda today. And I wanted to thank the legislators for some additional resources for the Climate Change Commission and other climate related impacts. And so the legislature provided two new positions, and it provides an opportunity to consider formalizing the support that DLNR has provided to this Climate Change Commission. Let's acknowledge it started in 2014, so we're on year 12 here of probably the next several hundred years, because even with our really wonderful mitigation reductions, the rest of the planet is not quite as far along as we are, and that will affect both all of the climate impacts, more violent storms, more wave erosion for our coastlines, more droughts, more heat stress. Dr. Belton, I'm just making sure that's in there. And the need for adaptations. And so in talking to legislators, I think they also agree that this is a marathon. It's not a sprint. Initially, when the legislature created the commission, the first charge was, let's look at sea level rise. It has the potential to be very disruptive of our coastal communities. The commission did that. The commission also looked at transportation and those impacts. Looked at equity issues in terms of climate impacts being hitting vulnerable groups harder with less resources to cope. And at this point, having looked at those issues, we now know that we're going to have to be working through the commission with all of our state agencies and our county partners to continue this effort and to continually renew it as changes happen throughout our planet. This is not a for action. This is just a discussion item, but I wanted to let the commission know that there is an opportunity to create an office of climate change. And with the staffing that we have, thank you to the legislators, we can actually do that in a realistic way. So thank you, Chair.
No, thank you. I guess I'll tee off of that.
Go ahead.
As far as internally goes, I think some of you know that currently we're Leah's under program ID LNR 101, which is OCCL.
And land division.
And land division. And since we're going into the next biennium, I think it behooves us, especially since there's more capacity now in Leah's office, to kind of create its own program ID, similar to what we would have with our other administrative attachments like Ahamoquin, KRC. Yeah, it's a work in progress, and we're getting the ball rolling on that now.
I'm not sure if everybody knows, but we were given 2 positions by the legislature this session. So that kind of also what's helping us perpetuate this concept, which is amazing. Very grateful.
So this represents, or could represent, a renewed commitment to looking at the challenges that climate is posing for Hawaii, and a promise to continue to re-examine where those impacts are hitting hardest, and looking at the long-term approach of, as Matt and Clarice have mentioned, where we can have the most impact. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any questions?
I have a lot of thoughts on this. I can just really briefly share a little bit about some of our experience at the Department of Health. And I don't think this will come as a surprise to any of you working in state government, but what we've really found is that, and we sort of unfortunately have exact examples, but without the dedicated focus on this topic as a thing, the advancement does not progress in a manner that I think is keeping up with, in our case, the health threats or whatever it might be. We've been working hard for a number of years now to try to develop a climate and health office in DOH. We've been stymied by a number of things. But what we found is that without that direct, clear focus and dedication to it, the work's not getting done. And as much as we try and push everyone to incorporate climate and health issues into their regular work, there's too much pressure on and other existing responsibilities. And so personally, I've become really adamant that we really need to invest the resources and really focus that and have that dedication with that as an issue. So that's sort of our experience. I will say, I also, and Mary Alice has heard me say this 1,000 times, so I'm sorry. But I think it's really important too that we are careful in the planning of something like this and that we make sure and incorporate all of the aspects of and impacts of climate change and the different parts of it. And that's, me and don't forget about the health part, just because for a long time, that hasn't been the focus of a lot of funding, resources, and focus on from climate change, and yet it's all interrelated. And I think that has changed. I think that mentality has changed, and we're starting to see the broader picture, but I think we just want to be really careful. I think that we make sure and incorporate all the different aspects of how it might come out in a state organization. And we're on board to help and collaborate.
Chair, I'd like to point out that DOT has already done that and provides a model in that they have, under Laura's leadership, they have created a dedicated office. And
Yeah, is it okay if I share? I am in full agreement with your experience. I think I do support the efforts that happened last legislative session to add more capacity. I think having an entity that would help coordinate between all the different state agencies has been helpful with this commission. And if, I think I just wanted to clarify, we're still having this entity, we're just having more capacity now, my understanding, and kind of elevating it. So I think that's all great. From my experience with our, and we're sort of 2 years old now, our Office of Energy Security and Community Outreach at DOT, and we're tasked with helping all the modes fulfill the Navahini settlement requirements and reduce emissions and build resilience. And I guess having that dedicated office, we are, every day is a challenge, right? To keep everyone coordinated, and a challenge in the best way possible, in that we do have folks in every mode that are working really hard on all of these positive climate initiatives. And I think it's also been helpful to have one office that wakes up thinking about how we reduce the transportation emissions and ends the day thinking about how we reduce transportation emissions. So I would love to see that in every state agency if possible. Maybe as a bridge, and then one day everyone will be thinking about that, in addition to our consistent values of safety and community health. So I think having at least that dedicated office to make sure there's folks in each department is a step forward to complement the coordinating entity that this commission provides.
So I'm hearing support for our reorg. Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
On behalf of a very small department compared to the Department of Health and the Department of Transportation, realistically, we cannot create an office. We are at max a department of like 220 souls. So we're very small, but what we can do and what we would appreciate, and what we have, and our dedicated staff who are very knowledgeable about these issues, right? So we would be in full support of a department or an office within DLNR with the resources, right, that we can talk to, because also jurisdictionally, of course, we are very separate, right? And we need to always have our beneficiaries as the forefront, right? So sometimes that does keep us from seeing like the statewide, we know that we should be more involved. I mean, sometimes it's hard to plug in because we're so focused because of our mission and because of who we serve. So having a office, knowing that there's an office with resources at DLNR would be very, very helpful.
That's the hope, that's the vision, that we wanted that dedicated structure for us to actually implement 225P. So,
Can I offer one more thing? I think just in terms of measuring success as a state, I think that is a gap that, you know, I look to other state agencies all the time and ask for data. Leah's been a great resource from the commission, and I think if we're thinking about building out new positions, maybe in the future, if it's not one of these two, that just having a statistician, a data analyst that is not focused on just one, like we have great data analysts that we tap all the time at State Energy Office, but if we had one that was, you know, looking at this statewide, that would help us and probably help in accountability, knowing we would have that increased reporting. And I know some of that's already in the works under Leah's leadership, but I think that additional capacity would be really helpful.
Do you know specifically for the new positions, like what the,
FT is gonna do.
yeah,
No, we have some ideas, but I haven't discussed it with co-chairs, so I should probably discuss with them for sharing them. But I welcome any thoughts or comments of what's needed. I mean, thank you, Laura, for that aspect. I know there's a wide range of needs, so I would love the positions to really help to not just build bureaucracy, but actually accelerate action and help to implement things.
I mean, shouldn't this be a forum to be able to have part of that conversation? Because isn't the fundamental purpose of the Climate Commission to bring state agencies together to talk about these things? And then wouldn't it make sense, if you haven't determined that yet, to talk to all the different agencies and see what would be most
What the
helpful to
needs
them?
are.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
okay. I mean, I feel like, are we restraining ourselves from having conversations here? I'm
Oh, I hear
not-
there's a need for a statistician over there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what does everyone else think?
I think one of the important things is like, it's clear, there's no duplicity, or like if there's reporting metrics, the metrics are reported in the same way or the same, you know, like vehicle, you're using the same assumptions. So I would just stress like minimizing duplicity as much as possible. So if it is a technical role, if they are doing more of the statistical analysis, they're coordinated with the right agency. We of course can always use more hands, but sometimes, you know, I think if you're not all on the same page in how things are reported, it can create confusion, and it can also result in just, you know, a lot of extra work that's not necessary. So I would stress the need for minimizing any duplicity, particularly on the technical side of things. But on the implementation side, I think as an agency that doesn't have, that is a policy making, we do more of the advisory type work, and we have limited ability, similar to the Office of Climate Change, to actually implement. I would just caution against putting too much pressure, or even, that's probably not even the best word, but understanding, like, if you're not a CIP agency, you're not the one actually you know, doing the implementation. So if it's, you can get funds from, say, if your role is to get funds, make sure there's access to give those funds to, and that's, you know, bureaucratic nature. So really think through the bureaucracies that exist as you create the position.
I think I can build off that because Stephen Walls, who's formerly at HSCO, did present an idea, which I thought was a great one, of someone to really help that funding coordination. You know, both with not just applying for grants, but also looking at, you know, private investments, you know, philanthropic dollars and trying to help, you know, working across the state with counties on that kind of coordination a little bit more, because I don't think there's a statewide coordination on that level of bringing more funding into the state. So that could be one of the roles potentially.
I think you're in a wonderful position starting from the ground. And working your way up, truthfully, because you have the opportunity to be able, in coordination with the Climate Commission and other influential voices, to be able to identify the targeted goals that you're going to need to be looking at. And once you identify those targeted goals, then you can start building the metrics that can be measured with them consistently on a year-by-year basis. And I think that you ought to be looking at just not what you're doing, but what's the effect of what it is that you're doing. So that you can, we did this, it affected the community this way, the environment this way. We did this for the infrastructure and affected the community this way, the environment this way. You know, you have that wonderful opportunity to inculcate the goals and the missions that already exist into a much more measured process to create those metrics to be able to look at. And that will also help you when you have to write your reports to the ledge to justify the funding that you've gotten. Subtle there.
Oh, yeah, but I mean, also like decide what you wanna, I mean, I would think about what you wanna do.
Yeah. So identify the
Not-
goals. What do you want to do?
Yeah,
You know, one of the goals could very well be work with each agency to be able to identify specific climate change measures that they can implement. You got a specific number of agencies. Okay, we're at 30% completion, 40% completion, 50% completion. What have they done to be able to implement them? You can track that to be able to support. So it's just a simple and probably overly simple one. I'm sorry for that example though.
I guess I'm just thinking there's thousands of jobs. I mean, you could pick one thing and it would be a full-time position to like
Oh, yeah.
help DOE do energy efficiency or, you know, I mean, but also picking one or two things that you can actually accomplish leads to real outcomes.
Yeah.
And I think that's important.
Yeah. Low hanging fruit is still fruit.
I wish that was low hanging.
Just
but-
It's true.
Hadn't heard that one. That's good.
Any other comments?
Do you have the political will of the top office? Do you have the political will of the governor's office? And because a while ago, when I worked for the city, the mayor's office got a Bloomberg Challenge grant or something where a person was part of the staff for a couple of years and we would have monthly meetings. We started with the low hanging fruit, identifying all the projects relating to climate change and it evolved and every month we had to report on progress. Did we ever do that at the state level? Or is that what the office is supposed to be doing?
State's a lot bigger than the city.
True.
And so I think, you know, each department has that responsibility for their mission. And a coordinating mechanism like the commission has the responsibility for identifying gaps, identifying policies that would find those synergies that Matthew's talking about. But I'd hesitate to create a
Oh, I'm not asking you to create, I'm just wondering if you have similar goals. Like identifying the goals and the office
okay.
would,
Yes, I see what you mean.
that new
Yes.
entity would
So
work with the
actually, the
agencies.
legislature has made, passed over the last 14 years, 12 years, a number of, well, actually starting in 2008, a number of targets that are now in law
Right.
that the state is required to
Oh,
achieve.
it's already identified in law.
So that's a starting point.
Mm.
And
Understood.
yeah.
Okay.
so we have them.
You got 'em, thanks.
We also have our climate action pathways that
Right.
we worked with the EPA funding. And we'll talk about that at a later meeting. We just wanted to not have too long of an agenda. But that also identifies key agencies that would implement those. So, you know, it was developed in coordination with those key agencies. But we'll, you know.
And you're still
can-
tracking those goals and projects and
I think that's like
coordinating.
where we're at now is like, okay, we've done that, that just finished. And now we need to like go back and be like, okay, where are we at with these and how can we
Got
help
it.
accelerate that? Yeah.
Thanks.
I think
I know it would be helpful to have somebody in charge, right? Because, for example, let's take successful conversion, which is a big issue for DHHL, but also I know for non-DHHL
Mhm.
lands, right? We have a statutory date and we are trying to hit it, but we get, you know, there's other things that DHHL is doing. I don't know if this is the same for other agencies, but if there was an office with staff who are like, you guys need to get here, and we're like, oh, but it's really hard, and there's like people who are like on top of these initiatives, especially if they're set by statute, right? To help individual agencies wherever they may be to hit those goals, that would be really helpful, right? So there's successful conversion, there was the solar initiative that we talked about, decarbonization. Like there's all of these different things that the individual agencies are responsible for keeping track of and hope that we hit some way, somehow, however we do it, right? So it would be really, really helpful to have dedicated resources now that you guys have capacity for like that express purpose to just keep everybody moving in that same direction so that we can all get to the finish line.
Fortunately, the legislature has identified lead agencies for most of these.
Oh, they have? Okay, well,
Yeah, but I think the commission does that.
Yeah.
Coordinating, I mean, I think coordinating among state agencies was really fundamentally part of.
Yeah, can I echo that too? I totally agree because I think if maybe your agency is like this, like if we have a goal and a deadline, that is what everything else then falls into place, right? We have that really works for our agency. That's kind of how we run. And I think if with the new positions, if there is that interface, like maybe we split them up, split the agencies up between the two and they're responsible for all of these agencies and not implementing the work, but just tracking their progress. I think that would be great because then it puts the burden, you know, you folks reach out to us like, hey, what are your 3 goals for this year? And maybe it is kind of back to your point about like, if, you know, you're setting these KPIs and I think just having them all in one place and short would be really helpful. And then, you know, that deadline would be approaching and that would put some urgency under all of us to hit it or come closer than we would, I think, if we didn't have that simplification of goals. So I think that would really work for us, and knowing that process would coming up would then make sure that, you know, we're conducting an agency process to review what our goals are and, you know, are they correct and can we still hit it by the end of 2026 or 2027?
Well, we certainly have the roadmap right here.
Marielle is sharing with me the 2050 sustainability plan.
Yeah.
With all the deadlines for each of
Mhm.
our statutory mandates.
So there are, a lot of them, and they cover a lot of ground. And this is available on our website. And it is certainly something that the commission can look to in terms of focusing on the progress that's being made in future meetings, not
Yeah.
today.
I think that's such a great resource, and I think each agency needs to figure out, like, some of the points won't be relevant, right? But if you're an agency that has a fleet of vehicles, hey, what is our goal just for this 1 year? Like,
Yeah.
what is our percentage of vehicles that we're trying to convert by the end of this year to get to closer to that? I think if we can break it down into those annual actions, that's what we're going to be working on starting in the fall. I think that is the kind of the meaningful progress that will help us get to those more amorphous goals.
Thank you.
I think that, there's a fair bit of literature out about how to build like a climate and health program. And one of the key points it talks about is you need a climate drive, they call a climate change driver, or they need like an individual who can move it forward. But I almost see this office as being the state version of that, because the commission is, I think, set up somewhat like that, but is mostly executive level, right? And like, as much as I wish I was in the nitty gritty of all the climate change and health work going on at DOH, I'm not. And I feel like a office that has a little more staff using some of these ideas that Laura and Katie were talking about could be that sort of individual driver for each of the different agencies, but adapted to how the agency might be approaching it. Because like, as Katie mentioned, she's got some subject matter experts that are sort of doing climate change and health work in addition to their probably other responsibilities. And we have some of that too, but hopefully at some point going to have actually dedicated people, and Laura's got some dedicated people. So within each one, it would be sort of addressing the agency and how they're approaching it, and then working forward. But I think the framework of using the statutory goals as sort of the metrics could work really well. But I know that we need the outside push at this point. There's just too many other competing priorities at all levels that we really could use that coordinating group to come and say, here's your responsibilities by statute, where are you, and kind of keeping track and pushing on it.
Any other thoughts? How about you,
Sure, I
Janice?
think this is all really good, and I just also within our own agencies, like Diane saying, we all have our own sort of goals, but I would argue some of we're thinking projects and
Mhm.
state, which is important. Got to lead by example, sort of our lead by example, but there's a lot of policies and legislation that needs to go onto like the private sector as well. And I know in the past we've kind of done like legislative briefings. What are your legislative priorities? But I think there's also space for like, okay, we need the private sector to get on board, and in order for that to happen, we need laws to change. And while this isn't necessarily like a policy making body, sometimes what's recommended by one agency for climate is like not consistent with what another agency needs. So like, this could be the space for collaborating on some of that. And I would just stress, like, we should get beyond just our own projects. And it should become more a higher level, like, and maybe it's not just legislative policy action, but maybe it's I'm throwing it out there, like federal level, advocating, hey, this is a grant that we have a new opportunity for, can we collaborate across agents? That would be something just to get past the projects.
And I think recommending policy is part of the commission's mandate, so
Yeah.
we can do that.
I'm looking around the room. Anything else? This is our last item. So I guess we're gonna wrap this up. And do I have to move to adjourn?
Can I,
Robert's rule says you don't.
Okay, cool.
can I
Before we
just
adjourn.
mahalo everyone for coming in person and being so patient with us at the start of this meeting. I really, unfortunately, do think that in person is great because we've had such great discussions. So I think in the future we'll continue to do that, but we'll discuss that. And I think we're moving to quarterly meetings.
Quarterly,
Yeah,
yep.
is what we're looking at. So we'll send out a hold and for everyone so you can plan in advance for the next upcoming meeting.
Calendaring with 19 people, that's so hard.
That's
That's
Yeah.
Leah's.
It is.
That's so hard.
I think you just have to say it.
Oh. Adjourned.